Ray Collins wiped the grease from his hands with a dirty rag and stared at the broken engine in front of him. Another customer who couldn't pay, another day without enough money for rent. The small auto repair shop that had been his father's dream was now becoming his nightmare. Bills piled up on his desk like autumn leaves, and each day brought new problems he couldn't fix with just a wrench and determination. The bell above the shop door rang, but it wasn't a customer. Mrs. Peterson, from the legal office down the street, walked in, holding a thick envelope. Her face carried the serious look that meant bad news or complicated news. Ray had learned to tell the difference over the years. "Ray, I have something for you," she said, placing the envelope on his workbench. "Your grandmother left you something, in her will, a storage unit across town, Unit 47 at Miller's Storage." Ray frowned. His grandmother had died 3 weeks ago, and he thought he'd seen everything she owned at the funeral home. She lived in a tiny apartment with barely enough room for her cat. What could she have kept in a storage unit? More importantly, how had she paid for it all these years? "Are you sure it's for me?" Ray asked, turning the envelope over in his hands. His name was written in his grandmother's shaky handwriting. She was very specific, said you were the only one who would understand what to do with what's inside. Mrs. Peterson adjusted her glasses. "The rent is paid up for the next 6 months, but after that it's your responsibility." After she left, Ray locked up the shop early and drove across town. Miller's Storage sat on the edge of the industrial district, surrounded by empty lots and abandoned warehouses. The owner, an old man with tobacco-stained teeth, handed Ray the key without much interest. Unit 47 was at the back of the facility, tucked away from the main rows. Ray rolled up the metal door and stepped inside. The smell hit him first. Old paper, mothballs, and something else he couldn't identify. Dusty furniture covered in white sheets filled most of the space. Boxes labeled in his grandmother's handwriting lined the walls. But in the corner, sitting on a small wooden table, was something that didn't belong. It looked like a piece of modern art made from metal and crystal. About the size of a briefcase, it had smooth curves and strange symbols carved into its surface. The metal seemed to shift color in the dim light, going from silver to bronze to something that looked almost blue. Ray had worked with every type of metal in his shop, but he'd never seen anything like this. Next to the device sat a leather journal, old and worn. Ray picked it up and opened to the first page. The handwriting was different from his grandmother's, more masculine, more confident. At the top of the page, someone had written, "Property of Walter Collins," in bold letters. Ray's breath caught. Walter Collins was his great-great-grandfather, the man who had disappeared during World War II. Family Stories said he'd been working on some secret military project and vanished without a trace in 1943. His body was never found, and he was declared dead after the war ended. Ray flipped through the journal pages, reading entries that seemed impossible. Walter wrote about strange lights in the sky, about finding pieces of something that had crashed in the woods near his research station. He described metal that felt warm to the touch and symbols that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. The entries became more excited as Ray read on. Walter had apparently found a way to make the metal pieces work together. He wrote about visions of distant stars and voices that spoke without sound. The handwriting became rushed, almost frantic, as if Walter was racing to record everything. Before something important happened. The final entry was dated December 15, 1943, 3 days before Walter's official disappearance. It was only one line. "I know the truth about our family now. I know where I really belong. The device will show the way home to anyone with our blood." Ray looked up from the journal at the strange device. Home? What did that mean? His family had lived in the same town for generations. His great-great-grandfather had been born right here, just like Ray himself. Against his better judgment, Ray reached out and touched the device. The metal was warm, just like Walter had written. The moment his fingers made contact, the symbols on its surface began to glow with soft blue light. Ray jerked his hand back, but the device continued to hum with energy. The crystals embedded in the metal started to pulse, and suddenly the air above the device shimmered. A three-dimensional image appeared, floating in the empty space. It was A map of the galaxy, but unlike any star chart Ray had ever seen. Lines of light connected different star systems, and one particular system far from Earth pulsed with bright red light. Ray stared at the holographic display, his mind racing. This wasn't possible. Technology like this didn't exist in 1943. It barely existed now. Yet here it was, responding to his touch just like Walter had described in his journal. He reached out again, and the image zoomed in on the pulsing red system. Detailed information scrolled past in symbols he couldn't read, but somehow part of his mind understood. Coordinates. Navigation data. A path through space to something that called to him in a way he couldn't explain. Ray spent the next hour reading through the journal again, finding details he'd missed the first time. Walter had somehow figured out how to use the device, but he'd never explained what it was or where it came from. He only wrote about feeling called home and knowing that their family was meant for something greater. The more Ray studied the device, the more it seemed to respond to him. The holographic star map became clearer, showing what looked like safe paths through dangerous areas of space. It was as if the device was teaching him how to read it, downloading information directly into his brain. By the time the storage facility's lights came on automatically in the evening, Ray had made a decision that surprised even him. He was going to follow the map. He had nothing left on Earth anyway. His shop was failing, his rent was overdue, and he had no family to speak of. Walter's journal promised answers about their family's true nature, and the device seemed to be offering him a way to find those answers. Ray carefully packed the device and journal in a sturdy box and loaded them into his truck. He had a lot of work to do. The holographic map showed he would need a ship capable of traveling between star systems, and somehow he knew exactly how to build one. The knowledge was there in his mind now, as if it had always been waiting for the right moment to surface. 3 months later, Ray stood in the salvage yard outside town, looking at the cargo ship he'd purchased with the last of his savings. It was old and beaten up, but it had good bones. More importantly, it had the kind of modular design that would accept the modifications his newly awakened instincts told him were necessary. As he began the work of installing Walter's device into the ship's navigation system, Ray wondered what he would find at the end of his journey. The pulsing red star on the holographic map called to him every night in his dreams, and he was finally ready to answer. Space looked different through the modified sensors Ray had built into his cargo ship. The stars seemed brighter, and he could see patterns in the cosmic background that normal human technology couldn't detect. After 2 weeks of travel through hyperspace following the device's guidance, he was beginning to understand that his great-great-grandfather had left him more than just a map. He'd left him a completely new way of seeing the universe. The ship's alarms began to chirp softly as they approached the coordinates from Walter's device. Ray checked his instruments, but everything appeared normal. Empty space stretched in all directions with nothing but distant stars visible through the viewports. According to the navigation system, he was exactly where he needed to be, but there was nothing here. Then the device on his control panel began to pulse faster. The metal grew warm under his hands, and the strange symbols carved into its surface started glowing brighter. Ray felt a familiar tingling sensation in his fingers, the same feeling he'd experienced when the device first activated in the storage unit. Without warning, the space in front of his ship began to ripple like water. The stars wavered and bent, and suddenly a massive planet materialized directly ahead. Ray's breath caught in his throat. One moment there had been empty space. The next moment, a world 3 times the size of Earth hung before him, surrounded by 2 silver moons. But this was no ordinary planet. The continents weren't the familiar brown and green of Earth. Instead, they glowed with soft blues and purples, as if the land itself was alive and producing its own light. Delicate rings of what looked like crystalline structures orbited the planet in perfect geometric patterns. Ray had seen pictures of Saturn's rings, but these were clearly artificial, too precise, too beautiful to be natural. His ship's communication system crackled to life, though he hadn't sent out any signals. A voice spoke in a language he didn't recognize, but somehow the meaning became clear in his mind. It was like having a universal translator built into his brain. "Welcome," Child of two worlds, the voice said, gentle but clearly non-human. We have been waiting for your arrival. Please allow our guidance systems to bring you safely to the surface. Ray wanted to respond, but before he could figure out how to answer, his ship's controls began operating themselves. The navigation system showed a course to the planet's surface, plotted by something far more advanced than his own technology. He could have fought it, could have tried to regain control, but something deep inside told him to trust the process. As his ship entered the planet's atmosphere, Ray got his first close look at the world Walter's device had led him to. The landscapes below were unlike anything he'd ever imagined. Vast forests of trees with silver leaves stretched between cities that looked grown rather than built. Towers rose from the ground like enormous flowers, their surfaces covered in patterns that pulsed with living light. Rivers of crystal-clear water wound between hills that seemed to be made of some kind of living rock. The rock itself moved slowly, reshaping the landscape in subtle ways as Ray watched. Gardens of plants that resembled earth flowers but glowed with their own inner fire dotted the countryside. Everything seemed alive, connected, part of a single living system. The ship touched down on a landing platform that rose from the ground to meet it. Literally rose, growing from the earth like a plant reaching toward the sun. Ray sat in his pilot's chair for several minutes trying to process what he was seeing. This wasn't just an alien world. This was a world where the line between technology and biology had been erased completely. A delegation was waiting for him, outside the ship. Ray counted 6 figures, clearly humanoid but definitely not human. They were tall and elegant, with elongated limbs and features that seemed almost ethereal. Their skin had a faint luminescent quality, covered in intricate patterns that shifted and changed as he watched. These weren't tattoos or paintings. The patterns were part of their biology, like the markings on exotic fish. The leader of the group stepped forward. Ray could tell it was the leader not by any visible rank insignia, but by the way the others arranged themselves in relation to this individual. The being was slightly taller than the others, with silver-white patterns that covered more of the visible skin. I am Kieran of the Valdari, the being said, and again Ray understood perfectly despite the alien language. We are honored to welcome you to our world, Ray Collins of Earth. Ray climbed out of his ship on shaky legs. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth's, making each step feel like a gentle bounce. The air smelled of flowers and ozone, with an underlying scent that reminded him of the sea. How do you know my name? Ray asked. His voice sounded strange to his own ears in the alien atmosphere. Kieran's face showed what Ray interpreted as amusement, though the alien's expressions were subtly different from human ones. We have been monitoring your family line for many generations. Your great-great-grandfather Walter has told us much about Earth customs and the Collins bloodline. He will be very pleased to know you received his message. The words hit Ray like a physical blow. Walter? He's alive? Very much so, Kieran replied. Though alive may not be exactly the right word anymore. He has undergone changes since arriving here, as will you if you choose to stay. But come, he is waiting to see you. We have much to explain, and I suspect you have many questions. The Valdari led Ray through their city, and each step brought new wonders. Buildings grew from the ground like living things, their walls breathing, gently and their surfaces shifting to accommodate the needs of their inhabitants. Transportation was provided by creatures that looked like a cross between giant butterflies and flying carpets, their wings made of some flexible material that caught and reflected light in impossible ways. The people they passed on the streets all had the same luminescent skin patterns as his guides, but each individual's markings were unique. Some had geometric designs, others had flowing organic shapes, and a few had patterns that seemed to tell stories in a visual language Ray was beginning to understand without learning. They approached the largest structure in the city, a tower that stretched impossibly high into the sky. Its surface was covered in the same living patterns as the Valdari themselves, but these designs were larger and more complex. As they got closer, Ray realized the patterns were moving, flowing up and down the tower's surface like slow rivers of light. This is our center of knowledge, Kieran explained. Walter spends much of his time here working with our bioengineers to create new forms of technology. He has become quite skilled at bridging the gap between your species' mechanical approaches and our biological methods. Inside the tower, Ray felt like he was walking through the inside of a living creature. The walls pulsed gently with a rhythm that reminded him of a heartbeat, and bioluminescent veins of light provided gentle illumination. Rooms opened and closed as they needed them, and furniture grew from the floor when they required a place to sit. They found Walter in a vast chamber near the top of the tower, working with what looked like a combination of Earth computers and alien biotechnology. He was bent over a console that seemed to be part machine and part living organism, its surface covered in controls that responded to both touch and thought. When Walter looked up, Ray felt his knees go weak. His great-great-grandfather should have been well over 100 years old, but the man who turned to greet him looked no older than 40. His hair was still brown with only hints of silver, his face was unlined, and his eyes held a clarity, an intelligence that seemed enhanced beyond normal human capability. "Ray," Walter said, his voice filled with emotion. "I hoped the device would eventually call one of our descendants, but I never dared believe it would happen in my lifetime." He paused, then smiled. "Though I suppose lifetime means something different here than it did on Earth." Ray struggled to find words. "Grandfather Walter, but how are you? Young, alive, different than you expected?" Walter chuckled. "I know it's a shock. I've had over 80 years to get used to the changes, but I remember how overwhelming it was at first. Sit down, Ray. Let me tell you about our family and about why you were always meant to find your way here." Walter gestured to a section of the living wall, and chairs grew from the floor to accommodate them. Ray sat down carefully, still amazed by how the alien furniture molded itself perfectly to his body shape. His great-great-grandfather moved, with the easy grace of a man in his prime, despite being over 100 years old. "I suppose I should start with how I got here," Walter began, settling into his own chair. "The official story was that I disappeared while working on a classified military project in 1943. That much was true, but the project wasn't what the government thought it was." Walter paused and looked at Kieran, who nodded encouragingly. "I was investigating what the military brass called unusual debris found in the forests of northern Canada. A trapper had reported seeing something fall from the sky during a thunderstorm. When the recovery team found the crash site, they discovered pieces of technology unlike anything on Earth. The device I found in your storage unit," Ray said. "Part of it, yes, but there was much more." Walter's eyes took on a distant look. "I spent months studying the pieces, trying to understand how they worked. The metal was unlike anything in our periodic table, and the symbols seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. But the strangest thing was how the technology responded to me specifically." Walter stood and walked to the bioconsole he'd been working at when they arrived. He placed his hand on its surface, and the entire system came alive with new activity. Patterns of light raced through the organic conduits, and displays showed information in both Valdari symbols and what Ray recognized as Earth mathematics. Other researchers on the project could handle the debris, but they couldn't activate it. Only I could make it respond. At first I thought it was just luck or some kind of static electricity, but as I learned more I realized the truth was much stranger. Kieran spoke up. "Your ancestor was genetically compatible with Valdari biotechnology because he carries Valdari DNA, as do you, Ray Collins." Ray felt the world tilt around him. "That's impossible. My family has lived on Earth for generations. We're human." "You are human," Walter confirmed, "but you're also something more. Our bloodline carries genetic markers from both species, passed down through centuries of breeding. We are hybrids, Ray, though the Valdari traits have been dormant until now." Walter returned to his chair and leaned forward intently. "The Valdari have been visiting Earth for over 1,000 years, not as conquerors or colonizers, but as observers and protectors. Occasionally, one of their scouts would form a relationship with a human. The children of these unions could pass for completely human, but they carried dormant alien capabilities in their genes." Ray shook his head, trying to process this information. So you're telling me we're part alien? That's why the device responded to us? That's exactly what I'm telling you, Walter replied. And it's why you're here. The device wasn't just a navigation tool. It was a genetic scanner and activator. When someone with the right bloodline touches it, it awakens their dormant Valdari abilities and calls them home. As if summoned by their conversation, Ray felt a strange, tingling sensation in his fingertips. He looked down at his hands and gasped. Faint patterns of light were appearing under his skin, similar to the markings he'd seen on the Valdari, but uniquely his own. The patterns pulsed gently, synchronized with his heartbeat. It's beginning, Kieran observed with satisfaction. Your hybrid nature is awakening in response to our planet's bioenergy field. The process is different for each individual, but the results are always remarkable. Over the following days, Ray experienced changes that should have terrified him, but instead filled him with a sense of completeness he'd never known. His physical strength increased dramatically, but more importantly, his mind began to work differently. He could understand the biotechnology around him intuitively, sensing how the living systems functioned and how to interact with them. The luminescent patterns on his skin became more pronounced and complex. Unlike the Valdari's markings, his patterns incorporated geometric designs that reflected his human engineering background. When he placed his hands on bioconsoles, they responded as readily as they did to Walter or the native Valdari. This is what I've been working on for 80 years, Walter explained as he showed Ray through the various levels of the knowledge tower. Learning to bridge the gap between human mechanical thinking and Valdari biological systems. Humans approach problems by building separate components and connecting them together. The Valdari grow integrated systems where every part supports every other part. They paused at an observation deck that looked out over the alien city. In the distance, Ray could see what looked like spacecraft, but they moved more like living creatures than machines. They flowed through the air with organic grace, their surfaces rippling and adapting to changing conditions. Those are Valdari ships, Walter said, following Ray's gaze. They're not built, they're grown. Each one is a unique organism, bred for its specific purpose. But they can also be operated by humans with the right genetic markers. In fact, they work better with hybrid pilots because we can provide both the biological interface they need and the tactical thinking that pure Valdari sometimes lack. Ray watched the ships dance through the sky and felt a strange longing. Part of him wanted to be up there, flying among the clouds in a living ship that responded to his thoughts and emotions. It was a desire that seemed to come from deep in his genetic memory. Why didn't you ever come back to Earth? Ray asked. Your family thought you were dead. Grandmother never got over losing you. Walter's expression grew sad. I wanted to return, believe me, but I couldn't risk exposing the Valdari to Earth's governments and militaries. This world is hidden for good reasons, Ray. There are forces in the galaxy that would destroy both our species if they knew about the hybrid program. Kieran joined them on the observation deck, moving with the fluid grace that all Valdari seemed to possess. The time for hiding is ending, the alien leader said. That is why the device was programmed to call your bloodline home. We have need of hybrid pilots and engineers for the challenges ahead. What kind of challenges? Ray asked, though part of him already suspected the answer. War, Walter replied simply. The Valdari have been protecting Earth from hostile alien forces for centuries, but our enemies have finally discovered your world's location. They call themselves the hegemony, and they view biological worlds as resources to be harvested. They've already consumed dozens of planets, stripping them of all organic matter to fuel their expansion. Ray felt a chill despite the warm alien air. Earth is in danger? Earth is a target, Kieran confirmed. The hegemony sees your world's diverse biosphere as a prize worth claiming, but they also see humanity as a potential threat because of your rapid technological development and aggressive nature. They plan to eliminate your species before you can become a challenge to their expansion. Walter placed a hand on Ray's shoulder. That's where we come in. The Valdari military is incredibly advanced, but they think in terms of harmony and balance. They're not equipped to fight an enemy that values only conquest and destruction. But humans understand warfare in ways the Valdari never will, and hybrids, like us, can operate both types of technology. You want me to help fight in an alien war? Ray asked. I want you to help save both our species, Walter replied. The Valdari have been developing hybrid bioships for decades, vessels that require both human tactical instincts and Valdari biological interfaces to operate effectively. We have the ships, but we need more pilots. We need more people with our bloodline who can bridge the gap between two very different ways of thinking about conflict. Ray looked out at the peaceful alien city, trying to imagine it under attack by the machine-like enemies Walter described. Then he thought about Earth, about the billions of people who had no idea that hostile forces were moving toward their world. How many others are there? Ray asked. How many people on Earth carry the hybrid genes? More than you might think, Kieran replied. The genetic markers appear in roughly 1 out of every million humans, concentrated in certain family lines. Most carriers never encounter anything that would activate their dormant abilities, so they live and die as normal humans. But those who do awaken their hybrid nature become capable of extraordinary things. Walter nodded toward the bioship still dancing through the alien sky. Each of those vessels requires a hybrid pilot to reach its full potential. We have dozens of ships ready for combat, but only 3 pilots capable of operating them effectively. Myself and 2 other Earth descendants who found their way here over the past decade. The device you inherited will help us locate others, Kieran added. It contains genetic scanning technology that can identify potential hybrids across interstellar distances, but someone needs to return to Earth and make contact with them. Someone who understands both worlds and can convince them to accept their true nature. Ray realized they were asking him to become a recruiter, to return to Earth and find others, like himself. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. He would be responsible for convincing ordinary humans that they were part alien and that their planet needed their help in a war most people couldn't even imagine. When do the hegemony forces reach Earth? Ray asked. Walter and Kieran exchanged glances. Our long-range scouts estimate 18 months, Walter replied. Possibly less if they encounter no obstacles along their route. Either way, we don't have much time to prepare. Ray nodded slowly, his decision crystallizing. He'd come to this world looking for answers about his family, but he'd found something much more important. He'd found his purpose, his place in the universe, and his responsibility to protect 2 worlds that were now equally his home. Ray stood in the bioship hangar, staring at the vessel that would become his partner in the fight to save 2 worlds. The ship looked nothing like the mechanical spacecraft he'd imagined as a child. Instead of metal plates and rivets, its hull was covered in what looked like smooth, dark scales that shifted color as the light hit them. The ship breathed slowly, its sides expanding and contracting in a rhythm that matched Ray's own heartbeat. Her name is Dawn Singer, Walter said, approaching from across the vast hangar. She's been waiting for a pilot for 3 years. The Valdari grew her specifically for someone with our genetic profile. Ray reached out tentatively and touched the ship's hull. The scales were warm under his palm, and he could feel a gentle vibration that seemed almost like purring. The moment his skin made contact, patterns of light raced across the ship's surface, and he heard something that wasn't quite a voice, speaking directly into his mind. She's welcoming you, Walter explained, though Ray had already understood the meaning of the ship's communication. Bioships bond with their pilots on a level that goes beyond simple control. You'll share thoughts, emotions, even reflexes. It takes time to fully integrate, but the connection becomes stronger than any mechanical interface could ever be. Over. The following weeks, Ray learned to merge his consciousness with Dawn Singer. The process was unlike anything he'd experienced. When he settled into the pilot's chamber, organic conduits connected with the luminescent patterns on his skin, creating a direct neural link between his brain and the ship's biological systems. Flying the bioship was like becoming a new form of life. Ray could feel the vessel's joy as they soared through the alien atmosphere, could sense her eagerness when they practiced combat maneuvers, and could share her contentment when they rested in the hangar. The ship's artificial intelligence was primitive compared to human consciousness, but it was genuine emotion, and it changed Ray in ways he was still discovering. Between training sessions, Walter showed Ray the true scope of the Valdari's hidden war with the hegemony. In a chamber deep beneath the knowledge tower, holographic displays showed the current state of galactic politics. The hegemony controlled nearly a third of the known galaxy, having consumed the biological matter of hundreds of worlds to fuel their expansion. They're not evil in the way humans understand evil, Walter explained as they studied tactical displays showing hegemony fleet movements. They're more like a disease or a natural disaster. They consume organic matter because that's what they were designed to do. Their creators built them as self-replicating machines meant to prepare worlds for colonization, but something went wrong. The original builders died out and the machines just kept expanding. The displays showed worlds that had been stripped bare by hegemony forces. Once green planets reduced to lifeless rock, their atmospheres poisoned and their surfaces covered in mechanical infrastructure. Ray counted dozens of dead worlds, each representing billions of lives lost to the machine plague. The Valdari have been fighting them for over 1,000 years, Walter continued. But it's been a defensive war, focused on hiding and protecting younger species until they're ready to defend themselves. Earth is just the latest world under threat, but it might also be the key to finally stopping the hegemony's expansion. What makes Earth special? Ray asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Humans, Walter replied simply. The Valdari are incredibly advanced, but they think in terms of harmony and balance. They're not equipped to fight an enemy that values only conquest and destruction. But humans understand warfare in ways the Valdari never will. More importantly, humans refuse to accept defeat even when victory seems impossible. Kieran joined them in the tactical chamber, moving with the fluid grace that all Valdari possessed. We have studied your species for centuries, Ray Collins. Humans are unique in their ability to adapt, to find solutions where none should exist, and to fight against overwhelming odds. These qualities, combined with Valdari biotechnology, could finally tip the balance of this ancient war. The alien leader activated a new display, showing Earth's solar system with projected hegemony fleet positions. Our long-range scouts have detected the advance elements of their invasion force. They will arrive at your world in 14 months, possibly less. But they are moving slowly, harvesting resources from asteroid fields and uninhabited worlds along their route. That gives us time, Walter said. Time to find and awaken more hybrids, time to train new bioship pilots, and time to prepare Earth's defenses. But we can't do it alone. The Valdari Council has been debating this for decades, but they've finally agreed to reveal themselves to select humans. Ray studied the tactical displays, his hybrid mind processing the information with enhanced clarity. The hegemony force heading toward Earth was massive, hundreds of ships designed for planetary consumption. Even with bioship technology, the odds seemed impossible. How many hybrids do you think we can find? Ray asked. The genetic markers appear in roughly 1 out of every million humans, Kieran replied. But they're concentrated in certain bloodlines. Based on our analysis of Earth's population genetics, we estimate there could be as many as 7,000 potential hybrids worldwide. Walter nodded grimly. But most of them have never encountered anything that would activate their dormant abilities. That's where the device you inherited becomes crucial. It contains scanning technology that can identify carriers across continents. With it, we can locate and contact potential recruits. Over the next few days, Ray learned about the other hybrid pilots who had found their way to the Valdari world. There was Maria Santos, a former military helicopter pilot from Brazil, who had awakened her abilities after touching a piece of alien debris found in the Amazon. Her bioship was a sleek interceptor class called Storm Dancer, optimized for high-speed combat. Then there was David Kim, a computer programmer from South Korea, whose dormant genes had activated during a lightning storm while he was working on quantum computing research. His ship, Mind's Eye, was designed for electronic warfare and reconnaissance, capable of interfacing with both biological and mechanical systems. Each hybrid brings their own perspective and skills, Walter explained, as they watched the other pilots practice formation flying. Maria understands air combat tactics better than any of us. David can hack into systems that would be impossible for pure humans or Valdari to penetrate. And you, Ray, have an intuitive understanding of mechanical systems that complements your biological interfaces perfectly. The diversity of their small group gave Ray hope, but also highlighted how much they needed to accomplish. 4 hybrid pilots could not face the hegemony's invasion force alone. They needed dozens, possibly hundreds of awakened hybrids to have any chance of success. "There's something else," Walter said, his expression growing serious. "The Valdari have been working on a project they call the Genesis Protocol. It's a way to rapidly awaken dormant hybrid genetics using bioengineered activation sequences. Instead of waiting for natural awakening events, we could potentially activate hundreds of hybrids simultaneously." Ray felt a chill despite the warm, alien air. "That sounds dangerous. What happens to people who aren't genetically compatible?" "Nothing," Kieran assured him. "The activation sequences only work on those who already carry the dormant markers. But for those who do carry them, the process is much more intense than natural awakening. Some candidates might not survive the transition." The ethical implications were staggering. Ray would be asking ordinary humans to risk their lives in a transformation process that could kill them, all for the chance to pilot alien bioships in a war most people couldn't even imagine. But the alternative was the complete destruction of human civilization. "The choice has to be theirs," Ray said finally. "We find the carriers, we explain the situation, and we let them decide. No one gets forced into this." Walter smiled, and Ray could see pride in his great-great-grandfather's eyes. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. Human ethics combined with hybrid capabilities. The Valdari respect all life, but sometimes they're too reluctant to ask individuals to risk themselves for the greater good. Humans understand that sometimes sacrifice is necessary to protect what matters most." As their planning session continued, Ray felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. In a few weeks, he would return to Earth with the device that could locate potential hybrids worldwide. He would have to convince skeptical humans that aliens existed, that they themselves were part alien, and that their world needed their help in an interstellar war. But he would also be offering them something incredible: the chance to become more than human, to pilot living ships among the stars, and to help save 2 worlds that would both be their home. For people who had always felt different, always, since they were meant for something greater, the hybrid awakening might be less of a curse and more of a long-awaited homecoming. "When do we leave?" Ray asked, his decision made. "Don Singer will be ready for interstellar travel in 3 days," Walter replied. "The journey to Earth will take about 2 weeks using Valdari navigation routes. That gives us 12 months to locate, contact, and train as many hybrids as possible before the hegemony arrives." Ray nodded, already planning his approach. He would start with the families he could trace through genealogical records, looking for bloodlines that might carry the dormant markers. Then he would use the device's scanning capabilities to search for carriers in major population centers. It would be a race against time, but it was a race they had to win. 10 months later, Ray floated in the pilot chamber of Dawn Singer, watching Earth grow larger through the bioship's living viewport. The planet looked exactly as he remembered. Blue oceans, white clouds, familiar continents. But everything had changed. Hidden across the world's surface were 63 newly awakened hybrids, each bonded with their own bioship and training for the battle that was only weeks away. The recruitment had been harder than Ray had expected. Most people he contacted thought he was crazy, at least until he demonstrated the alien device and showed them the undeniable proof of their own genetic heritage. Some had rejected the transformation even after seeing the evidence, choosing to remain fully human, rather than risk the dangerous awakening process. Ray respected their choice, but each refusal felt like a lost opportunity to save both worlds. Of those who accepted, 3 had died during the awakening process. Their bodies couldn't handle the rapid genetic changes, and they had simply faded away as their human and Valdari DNA failed to integrate properly. Ray still carried the guilt of those losses, but Walter had reminded him that the alternative was the extinction of both species. "Contact from Earth Defense Command," Dawn Singer whispered directly into Ray's mind. The bioship had learned to communicate in words over the months of their partnership, though she still preferred emotions and images. Admiral Patterson wants to speak with you. Ray smiled despite his nervousness. Admiral Patricia Patterson had been the first military official to take his warning seriously, mainly because her own genetic scans had revealed dormant Valdry markers. She had undergone the awakening process and now piloted a heavy assault bioship called Iron Will, using her decades of naval experience to coordinate Earth's hybrid defense fleet. Put her through, Ray said, and suddenly he could hear Patterson's voice as clearly as if she were sitting beside him. Collins, we've got incoming hegemony scouts at the edge of the solar system, Patterson reported, her tone crisp and professional. 3 ships moving fast toward the outer planets. This is it. Ray felt Dawn Singer's excitement spike through their neural link. The bioship had been bred for combat, and months of training had only sharpened her eagerness for battle. Roger, that Admiral. Dawn Singer and I are ready. What about the others? All 62 hybrid pilots are reporting ready for combat, Patterson replied. The Valdari support fleet arrived this morning with Kieran and Walter aboard. We're as prepared as we're ever going to be. Over the past months, Ray had watched in amazement as Earth's government slowly came to terms with the reality of alien contact. The revelation that hostile forces were approaching the planet had unified humanity in a way that nothing else ever could. Political differences became irrelevant when faced with extinction. Military forces that had been enemies for decades were now working together to coordinate planetary defense. The hybrid pilots had become the key to everything. Their bioships were faster and more maneuverable than any human aircraft, while their human tactical thinking gave them advantages that pure Valdari pilots couldn't match. But more importantly, they could interface with both human technology and Valdari biotechnology, creating a defense network that neither species could have built alone. All pilots, this is Admiral Patterson. The command frequency crackled to life. Long-range sensors are showing the main hegemony fleet dropping out of hyperspace near Jupiter. Count is 347 vessels, including 6 world-killer dreadnoughts. They'll reach Earth orbit in 18 hours. Ray felt his stomach clench. 347 ships against their small fleet of bioships and converted human spacecraft. The odds were even worse than their worst-case projections. But then he felt Dawn Singer's confidence flowing through their link, and he remembered what Walter had taught him about human nature. Humans don't win fights because the odds are good, Walter had said during one of their final training sessions. They win fights because they refuse to accept that the odds matter. The hybrid defense fleet moved to intercept the hegemony force at the asteroid belt, hoping to use the rocky debris as cover. Ray's tactical display showed their formation, 62 bioships arranged in hunting packs, supported by converted human ships, and 3 massive Valdari battleships that had come out of hiding for the first time in centuries. The hegemony ships were exactly as ugly as Walter had described them. They looked like mechanical infections, all sharp angles and industrial purpose. Their hulls were covered in harvesting equipment designed to strip biological matter from conquered worlds, and their weapons were optimized for planetary bombardment, rather than ship-to-ship combat. That's their weakness, Maria Santos reported over the tactical channel. Her bioship Storm Dancer was leading the forward scouting group. They're not designed to fight an organized defense. Their tactics are built around overwhelming primitives with superior technology. But we're not primitives anymore, David Kim added. His reconnaissance ship Mind's Eye was already probing the enemy fleet's electronic systems. And we have something they've never encountered before. Bioships piloted by hybrid minds. The battle began at maximum range, with both fleets exchanging long-distance fire as they closed the gap. The hegemony's mechanical precision was impressive, but their predictable attack patterns made them vulnerable to hybrid tactics. Ray watched, his fellow pilots dancing between enemy fire, their bioships moving with a grace and creativity that no mechanical system could match. Dawn Singer's excitement reached a crescendo as they entered optimal combat range. Ray felt his consciousness merge completely with the bioship's systems, becoming something greater than either human or Valdari could achieve alone. His thoughts controlled the ship's movement while her instincts guided their aim. Together, they became a perfect fusion of biological intuition and human tactical thinking. The hybrid fleet tore through the hegemony's forward formations like predators among prey. The enemy ships were individually more powerful, but they couldn't adapt to the unpredictable attack patterns of creatures that were part machine, part organism, and part human stubbornness. We're actually winning, Ray realized, watching enemy ships fall to coordinated hybrid attacks. Dawnsinger's weapon systems had disabled 2 hegemony vessels, while his tactical planning had helped coordinate strikes that crippled several more. But the hegemony adapted faster than expected. Their central command ship began broadcasting new tactical algorithms to their fleet, and suddenly, the mechanical ships were moving with improved coordination. Ray watched in horror as 3 bioships were destroyed by concentrated enemy fire, their pilots' voices cutting off mid-transmission. "They're learning from us," Admiral Patterson reported grimly. "Their central command is analyzing our attack patterns and updating their responses in real time. We need to end this quickly, or they'll adapt to all our advantages." Walter's voice came through on a secure channel, speaking directly to Ray. "It's time for the Genesis Protocol. We've identified 47 more carriers on Earth who might survive the rapid awakening process. But someone needs to get through to the planet's surface to activate them." Ray understood immediately. The rapid awakening protocol could potentially double their pilot count, but only if someone could reach Earth and activate the dormant carriers while the battle raged in space. It would be a desperate gamble, but their current forces wouldn't be enough to stop 6 world-killer dreadnoughts from reaching the planet. "Dawnsinger and I will make the run," Ray decided. "We're fast enough to get through their lines, and the bioship can interface with the activation device." "Negative," Patterson's voice was sharp with command authority. "We need every pilot in the battle line." "Admiral, respectfully, we need those extra pilots more than we need one more ship in the current engagement," Ray replied. "And if the dreadnoughts reach Earth, none of this matters anyway." There was a pause, and Ray could almost hear the Admiral weighing impossible choices. Finally, her voice came back, resigned but determined. "Do it. But Ray, if you can't get back up here in time, those new pilots will be Earth's last line of defense." Ray guided Dawnsinger into a steep dive toward Earth, using the planet's gravity well to build speed while avoiding the majority of enemy fire. The bioship's living hull adapted to the increasing atmospheric friction, reshaping itself for optimal performance as they streaked toward the surface. The device that had started Ray's journey now served as the key to humanity's salvation. Connected to Dawnsinger's biological systems, it could broadcast the awakening sequence to every dormant carrier on the planet simultaneously. The process was dangerous. Some of the new hybrids might not survive, but it was their only chance. Ray landed at a hastily prepared facility in Nevada, where human scientists and Valdari bioengineers had constructed an amplification network for the awakening device. As soon as Dawnsinger interfaced with the system, Ray felt the signal pulse out across the globe, seeking minds that carried the dormant potential for transformation. 47 responses came back almost immediately. Ray felt each awakening, as if it were happening to him personally. The confusion, the pain, the wonder, and finally the emergence of enhanced consciousness that marked successful hybrid integration. 39 survived the process. 8 more lives lost, but 39 new pilots who might make the difference between victory and extinction. The new hybrids were bonded with bioships that had been grown in hidden facilities around the world, vessels that had been waiting for the right pilots to awaken. Within hours, Ray was leading a squadron of 39 newly awakened hybrids back toward the battle zone, hoping they would arrive in time to matter. The situation in space had deteriorated, while Ray was on the surface. The original hybrid fleet had been reduced to 41 active ships, while the hegemony dreadnoughts were approaching Earth's outer atmosphere. Ray could see the massive ships beginning to deploy their harvesting equipment, preparing to strip away the planet's biosphere. "New contacts incoming." David Kim's voice was tight with emotion. "Ray's back, and he's brought friends." The final phase of the battle was unlike anything Ray had ever imagined. 79 hybrid bioships, supported by human and Valdari vessels, threw themselves against 6 dreadnoughts that were each larger than Earth's biggest cities. The new hybrids fought with desperate courage, their recently awakened abilities pushed to their limits by the urgency of protecting their home world. Ray found himself coordinating the attack on the lead dreadnought, his enhanced mind processing tactical information from dozens of sources, while Dawn Singer executed maneuvers that would have been impossible for a purely mechanical craft. The battle became a test of everything that made humans unique: their creativity, their refusal to accept defeat, their ability to adapt and improvise under impossible circumstances. When the last dreadnought finally fell, its massive bulk breaking apart under concentrated hybrid fire, Ray felt a silence settle over the battlefield that was deeper than space itself. Earth was safe. Both worlds were safe. The hegemony fleet was destroyed, and their invasion route would warn other machine fleets away from human space for centuries to come. In the aftermath, as Ray piloted Dawn Singer back toward Earth's surface, he reflected on how much had changed since he'd first found Walter's device in that dusty storage unit. He was no longer just human, no longer just a small-town mechanic, struggling to pay rent. He had become something new, something that bridged two worlds and two species. The hybrid pilots would continue to serve as guardians of both Earth and the Valdari homeworld. Some would remain on Earth, preparing for future threats and helping humanity take its first steps toward becoming a spacefaring civilization. Others would journey to alien worlds, exploring the galaxy and making contact with other species that might need protection from forces like the hegemony. Ray had found his great-great-grandfather and discovered the truth about his family's nature. But more importantly, he had helped both of his species, human and Valdari, survive to see a future among the stars. It was exactly the kind of impossible victory that humans specialized in, the kind that proved they truly were meant for, something greater than one small world orbiting an ordinary star.